I've saved the results of the previous exercise as the glassbox.ai, and in this exercise, I'm going to give you a sense of what's meant by the 1-point, 2-point, or 3-point perspective grid. Now, this is not Illustrator's nomenclature, by the way. This is standard perspective drawing. You can have 1 vanishing point or 2 vanishing points or 3 vanishing points. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that a perspective drawing created with 1 vanishing point is somehow not going to look as good as one rendered with 3 vanishing points. However, 3 vanishing points is a heck of a lot more complicated. So let me show you what's going on there. I've got this other illustration that I've created for you that's called perspectivevarieties.ai, and it contains 3 different photographs that are rendered with different levels of perspective. These are real-world photographs from the Fotolia image library. Right now, here inside the layers panel, I have all 3 of the layers turned on. I'm going to twirl open the 1-point layer, which is the top here. This is 1-point perspective. That is, everything is declining toward a single common vanishing point. And to give you a sense of what that looks like, I've got this grid object right there. Go ahead and turn it on, and you'll see this mesmerizing bunch of junk here that's explaining how a 1-point perspective scene works. So what we're seeing here is a green horizon line, and that horizon line is cutting through the horizon of the scene. So this is the way photographs work. So real-world photographs are real-world sight lines as well. The biggest difference between the way that we see a scene and a standard camera sees a scene is that we have binocular vision so that we can actually perceive depth by reconciling the vision of the world from our 2 eyes. However, otherwise, depth is imparted to us as a function of perspective. So we've got this horizon line, and that's really it in this scene. And then we've got these trajectory lines that are declining toward this single vanishing point. And you might think of the trajectory lines as representing a left-hand plane and a right-hand plane, but as we'll see in Illustrator, you've just got one plane that you can flop back and forth like a door on a hinge. However, you can draw in both directions, just like we're seeing here. The effect that you get when you're working with a single vanishing point is that everything is flat on. So in other words, everything along the ground level here is going to be completely represented as horizontal, and all of the vertical elements are going to be exactly vertical as well. And that's represented by these grid lines. So these purple lines are evenly spaced grid increments. Now, I should caution you, all of this is drawn by hand. These were not created using the perspective tool inside of Illustrator, but they are representative of how this scene works. I'm going to go ahead and twirl close 1 point and turn it off to reveal in the background the 2-point layer. And this is an example of a scene that's rendered in 2-point perspective. And if I twirl this layer open, it has a grid as well. I'll go ahead and turn on that grid. And now I've added another color here so that we're seeing the left pane represented in orange with its left-hand trajectory lines. And then we're seeing the right pane represented in red with its right trajectory lines. Now, the reason I'm not observing Illustrator's coloring, which is blue for the left pane and orange for the right pane, is just because I want these lines to stand out from the background photograph. There's the horizon line down here at the bottom of this building, so we have a pretty low-angle view of this scene. And then we have these grid lines as well. So the grid lines are absolutely vertical in this case because we've just got 2 vanishing points and that's it. But we did lose the horizontal grid lines. So we're left with vertical, no horizontal this time. We've also got a left vanishing point and a right vanishing point. Notice that they're shown as being off screen. And that's because they're way out there. I'm going to have to zoom out in order to take in those points. There's the right-hand vanishing point right there. So it's that point at which the trajectory lines converge at the horizon line. By the way, if I turn on 1 point again, that goes for the 1-point perspective scene as well. The vanishing point is that point at which the trajectory lines intersect the horizon line. That's always the way it is. All right, I'm going to turn off that 1-point layer so we can see what's going on inside this 2-point scene. Way over here on the left-hand side is the left vanishing point. So that's where the left trajectory lines converge with that horizon line. And basically anything at that point, it vanishes into nothingness because it goes beyond our ability to see it. And really, that might be a function of it escapes beyond the curvature of the Earth or what have you, but it evaporates into nothingness. And I'm going to press Control 1 or Command 1 in order to zoom back into the 100% view here. I'll collapse my 2-point layer and turn it off. And we can see in the background a scene rendered in 3-point perspective. In this case, we have trajectory lines going every which way. There are no horizontal or vertical grid lines left anymore. Everything's on a trajectory. So we've got a left pane and we've got a right pane, and then we've got another pane that's disappearing into the sky. So to see what that looks like, I'm going to twirl open the 3-point layer and I'm going to turn on its grid. And things are quite complicated at this point. Now, we are not going to create a scene using 3-point perspective in Illustrator. And I'm going to tell you why. Because it makes you want to claw your eyes out. I mean, it's just not a pleasant thing, I have to tell you. So you can try it out. And all you have to do to set up a 3-point perspective grid is go ahead and select the perspective grid tool. And then once you've done that, once you have your basic grid on screen, you go up to the view menu, you choose perspective grid, and you choose 3-point perspective. And then you choose this 3-point normal view command right there, which represents the default setting. However, it's going to be quite a bit different than the scene that we're seeing here. You'll be looking down on the building from a great height, as opposed to up at the buildings from ground level. That's up to you. You can try it out, but I do want you to understand how 3-point perspective works, if only for your own edification. Notice here we've got the left-hand trajectory lines. Once again, that's the left-hand pane represented as orange lines. We've got the right-hand pane represented as red lines, and they're overlapping each other. These panes are intersecting each other at this point, so that the left-hand trajectory lines are really defining the right-hand building, and the right trajectory lines are defining the left-hand building. That's totally okay. That's great for interior scenes as opposed to exterior as well. And then we have these yellow lines that are representing the zenith trajectory lines. What that means is that the vanishing point is located at the top of the scene. If the vanishing point is underneath the scene, it's called a nadir. That's N-A-D-I-R. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and zoom out here because notice we've got a left-hand vanishing point and a right-hand vanishing point, and the horizon line is also off screen. So in order to find those, we're going to have to zoom way out. They're way down there, as you can see. I'm zoomed quite a ways out from my illustration. But just projecting the scene, the horizon line must be here. So this would be basically where we're standing looking up at the scene. And then the right-hand vanishing point is located at this convergence, where the red trajectory lines intersect with the green horizon line. And then the left-hand vanishing point is over here, where the orange trajectory lines intersect that green horizon line. So way, way out there. And that's part of the problem with representing a 3-point perspective grid. You have to zoom way the heck out in order to set up the grid in the first place. I'll press Control-1, Command-1 on a Mac in order to zoom back in. That's how these various vanishing point scenarios work out. Regardless of whether you set up a 1-point grid, a 2-point grid, or a 3-point grid, it's still a 3-dimensional scene. I want you to bear in mind, it's not like a 1-point grid is a 1D scene and a 2-point grid is a 2D scene. That's nonsense. They're all 3-dimensional scenes. It just depends on what your view of that scene is. And you can see here, if I go ahead and turn back on the 1-point perspective view, that is still a very compelling scene. Some of the most amazing high Renaissance paintings were created using 1-point perspective, and they look absolutely great. So what I caution you to do is try to work in 1-point or 2-point perspective for all of your perspective needs. That's just going to keep things that much simpler in the long run.